Ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. Thank you for standing by and welcome to the webinar on deriving value from your data in the open source environment. At this time, all participants is in listen-only mode. And post that, we'll open it for Q&A session. During the course of presentation, should you wish to ask any question, you may type your question in the chat panel and we'll try to address as many questions we can during the Q&A session. I would like to now hand it over to our speaker for today. We have with us Mr. Guna Chellappan, who is the Director, Hybrid Cloud and Analytics from Asia Pacific and IBM. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Very good afternoon to everyone. My name is Guna. I am responsible for analytics in IBM for Asia Pacific, and I've been working in this industry of analytics for the last 20 years. And I've been actually helping many of my customers in their journey towards innovation and driving more value, and particularly in the recent years when there's been a significant change in the environment towards open source to drive innovation. I've been working with many organizations trying to help them derive value quickly for their business in the age of the new open source economy. So with that, let me just start my presentation. At all times, feel free to actually put in a question on the chat. We'll end of the call in about 45 minutes, and then we'll be able to answer your questions at that point in time. One of the key challenges that every organization is seeing is about how do you survive in an economy. As the economy changes, if you look at it in the Fortune 500 in 1955 to now, more than 90% of the companies have fallen out or are not in existence anymore. And likewise, research is showing that companies that are in the Fortune 500 now, more than 40% of them will not be in the Fortune 500 in 10 years. So effectively what has happened is that the rate of change in our industry, whether you're a bank or retailer or a telco, the rate of change within the business has changed significantly. And one of the biggest challenge is the pace of technology innovation. How do you keep up with the changes in technology in your industry and not get disrupted? There are a lot of other challenges when it comes to things like cybersecurity and deregulation, etc. But the primary challenge has always been around how do you innovate and stay ahead of the market or the competition. So with that, what are key things that what makes a big difference between a leader and someone who actually is the one that's going to be falling out of the top 500, for example, is being able to innovate new models. The key thing here is staying ahead of the disruptors. A lot of the CXOs are looking at how can I as a bank go into, for example, payment technologies? How can I as a bank go into micro lending? Or in fact, if I as a bank, how can I even become a retailer, setting up an e-commerce shop front, etc. So being able to develop, for example, new business models to get to a point where you can actually sustain revenue and be more competitive than the others in your industry. Second thing that's most important is actually the customer experience. 81% of the companies that are positioned as leaders effectively look at establishing an excellent customer experience as the key difference to their success. Lastly, the key advantage is being fast, flexible, and agile. So that requires significant change in terms of how an operation is run, how from a business perspective, organizations are able to keep up with technology, to implement new initiatives, etc., that drive value. Sorry, I actually have been disconnected. Would the moderator be able to move to the next slide?
Sir, we are on slide number 2.
Thank you very much. So when you look at from a technology perspective, what's happening in the industry is from whether you're looking at how the digital disruption is happening because of people implementing new semiconductor technology like quantum computing, etc. But what is most relevant is artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data. Being able to leverage these technologies makes a significant difference in being able to disrupt the industry. So just to repeat again, I'm on slide 4. Although there have been rapid changes in, for example, mobile connectivity, allowing customers to access a business, a customer, a product very easily using mobile technology or cloud, the significant compelling differentiators have been around artificial intelligence and machine learning and big data. So with that, if you look at the next slide, deriving value from your data in an open source environment, which is our topic for today. Moving to the next slide. The raw material in all your business is the data that you have. Whether you're a bank, a retailer, a manufacturing company, the data that you have effectively becomes, in the age of digital disruption, the raw material. Next slide. In an open source environment, that represents a tool. While many organizations have been historically working with companies like IBM, Microsoft, Oracle, etc., to provide tools, the key innovation has been in the open source environment. And in the open source environment, being able to take advantage of it makes a significant difference, right? So that's where the open source environment provides the tools. And lastly, deriving value. The next slide. Deriving value means that's where the money is coming from for a business to be able to drive the new insight that it needs to actually stay ahead of the industry. Moving to the next slide. So the key thing here, it becomes, in the open source world, it really becomes very important in how you choose your tools, right? If you look at the kind of materials you have, the raw material that you have, the skill level of your people, do I have programmers, developers, etc.? Not every organization can be a Google or a Yahoo or a Amazon, etc., because you will not have 10,000 programmers or 5,000 programmers to be able to code things. And your people, the skill level of people become critical. And 3, time constraints. When you look at the time constraint that you have to get to market, in an enterprise environment, you are very constrained by how long it takes for you to actually get to the market with a new innovation. If you're slow or you're late in the game, typically you get displaced. And lastly, the cost of being late in the market. If you're not able to keep up with your competitors, then just like what happened to many of the companies in the Fortune 500 in 1955, they were displaced in the market. So if you take this analogy of a master carpenter, if you are a master carpenter, guess what? If I give you a piece of wood, next slide, and a piece of hammer, you can build a house. That's how the open source environment is. It's a tool, like a hammer, in the hands of a master carpenter with all the right skills. He would be able to develop anything, a house, a table, a chair. But there are other options available. If you go to the next slide, you'll see there are tools like floor nailers. They do the same job of a hammer, but they do it significantly faster. Likewise, you have drill bits, you have your floor sander, all of these additional tools mean that you can actually become a lot more productive than a hammer. So what I was trying to illustrate here is that if every organization was able to get master carpenters, then logically it makes sense if you could use the vanilla open source tools to develop any technology that you like. But however, most organizations are not able to get skilled resources like a master carpenter. So to be able to take advantage of open source tools, you can use things like the floor nailer, etc., productivity tools built on open source, so that you can have an average carpenter that will help you drive more value out of your open source tools without venturing too far ethos of open source. So going to the next slide, slide 7. IBM's strategy, when we talk about driving value in open source, is not about cloud or on-premise, it's about both. And neither is it about traditional relational databases or open source. You don't have to choose between one or the other. In fact, it's about both. Being able to use relational databases while you leverage new open source, Hadoop, NoSQL, Mongo technologies. It's about both SQL and NoSQL. And we are not asking an organization or expecting an organization to look at only analyzing their structured data or unstructured data. You should be able to analyze both environments, regardless of whether it is only on structured data or unstructured data. Next slide. Slide 8. So the key thing to drive this open source platform is around a data fabric. The reason why I emphasize the word data fabric is that it requires you to take your open source innovation that you have, but provide 3 key capabilities, right? 1, simple access to data. If your data is locked away and it requires you 24 hours to be able to access data in the hands of whether it's a data scientist or a business user or an analyst, then you've lost the purpose of leveraging the open source, which is supposed to give you the agility in your business. 2, trusted data. One of the biggest challenges in many organizations is that while they go down the journey of analytics using open source, etc., not being able to trust the data becomes a major issue because different parts of the organization end up relying on different parts of the data. And the data doesn't make sense because they don't sync up, and then you have a problem. And lastly, everyone needs to start looking at how you can implement artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence together with data science, because that's what's going to help you drive stronger business value out of your data. Moving on to the next slide, I'm going to talk about one of the key parameters which I said, the data access, the ubiquitous data access. How do you make data access simple and accessible? So if you go to slide 10, you'll see that from an organization perspective, as an organization moves from left to right of the chart, the ability to move from being a data-driven company to an insight-driven company to literally get to become a digitally transformed company, one of the key challenges tends to be how are you able to actually move up this value chain? And as you're moving up the value chain, there are various different challenges that actually happen. So for example, to become a data-driven company, there's a lot of cultural issues that you need to work through. How do you actually break the silos to understand how you can actually provide better access to your data across your organization, right? So understanding the what and the why becomes important. And that's where the first stage of analytics comes in, and you focus very much on modernizing, focus on cost reduction, etc. The next level where you become insight-driven is where you actually get the competitive advantage. You're able to predict, for example, what will my customer churn rate be? For example, what would my customer be buying next or expected to do next? So as you get into that model, you will now need to look at predictive or machine intelligence to help you drive what that outcomes will be. And finally, as you get into the last stage, which drives the most value, is around the digital transformation, around developing new business models, etc. Going on to the next slide, 11. The key elements of a hybrid data management. A lot of organizations, when they go into open source, one of the key things they think about is that I have to move all of my data to Hadoop, or I have to move all of my data to an open source database like Postgres or Mongo or Couchbase. That does not have to be the case. The key thing in a hybrid data management strategy, whether you're on-premise or cloud or in a single repository, the objective is to provide access to the data across the organization. So how you actually democratize the access, giving users multiple ways to access the data, giving them the flexibility, the simplicity in terms of being able to experience, access that data. And finally, being able to introduce things like machine learning, not only to drive value, but even to automate many of the capabilities within the system itself. And lastly, going to the cloud. One of the advantages of the new open source platforms are available on the cloud. For example, cloud, you will be able to take advantage of whether it's Hadoop or Postgres or Mongo or DB2 or MySQL, all of them from an access perspective, and all of these various databases are seamlessly connected for you. So taking the science or the complexity out of managing that infrastructure away. Going to slide 12. So hybrid data management talks about, like I said, how do you actually embed machine learning within your data? So to be able to drive more analytics, you need to be able to embed the machine learning algorithms, etc., in your data. So running your analytics on your data rather than bringing your data to analytics. Being able to do transactional processing as well as analytical processing in one place without having to move your data. A common SQL engine so that you can actually access whether it's Hadoop or DB2 or another technology, all using a common SQL engine without having to rewrite your business applications repeatedly. And being able to access both on-premise and cloud NoSQL as well as SQL environments. Going on to slide 13, trusted data delivery for unified governance. I'd like to emphasize a lot of organizations, when they go into open source, one of the key things they think about is taking their data and putting it into an open source database. But what is typically missed out is the whole governance that goes around the technology. So it's really important to look at it from a technology perspective or a business perspective, how the governance is managed. So with that, you look at slide 14. When an organization were doing governance, very much the focus on governance was always around what's on my data, what's behind my firewall, what's my data. And usually it's compliance driven and IT led. But where governance is now heading to is that organizations are trying to do API-driven data access to not only internal organizations, but they're also doing the same thing with other organizations. So when you start looking at accessing data or connecting data to other providers, for example, non-internal data, or you are trying to actually now manage metadata across multiple different types of data sources, or you are now looking at compliance, more complicated compliance and regulations like GDPR and BCBS, etc., then business and IT both come together to be able to achieve that outcome. So to do that, you need to look at how you can actually have a governance metadata that covers both your structured and unstructured, your traditional data sources, as well as your next generation open source data platforms. So if you look at the next slide, slide 15, as a customer, you're trying to implement very flexible, agile use cases around, for example, self-service data or analytics, letting your marketing department, letting your finance department be able to access the data in a controlled, governed manner. You should be able to introduce things like data science to them. And as you try to introduce data science to them, the technology limitations of, for example, silos shouldn't exist. And that's where the unified governance platform comes in to assist in trying to create a fabric that allows a data scientist to go and look for data, provision the data in an environment, get the list of people who have actually used that data, build the models, extract the data or shape that data, build your models in R or Python, and develop a model and push it into production. And once it's done, walk away. The sandbox shuts off. While throughout this whole process, while you've introduced access to data, you're still keeping it very agile, very simple, easy to access. So you look at slide 16. The key thing about making data simple is that you are introducing a data pipeline or a data fabric that supports a data governance across the whole analytics lifecycle. Not just connecting to various data sources. As new data sources coming in, you are able to actually connect with all of them, discover those data sources, and then you are able to take advantage of it by building metadata dynamically, having machine learning to learn the new data elements, identifying your data quality issues, and finally supporting your analytics. The third area that I mentioned that's really critical is in slide 17, is your insight-driven innovations. We're talking about AI and data science. A lot of organizations talk about data science. The key thing or complexity that comes around with data science is how easy is it for me to manage it, right? How easy is it for me to train my models? How easy is it for me to build a model? Not every one of us has an expert data scientist within our organization. So when that comes up, it's the same issue of a master carpenter. I do not have the skill resources that I'm looking for. So what I need to look at is, can I have medium skilled data scientist, and I provide him with the right tools and framework on open source that I can then leverage his capabilities. So if you look at like the next slide, slide 18, we are talking about prescriptive analytics within the analytics portfolio, right? So when you talk about the different types of reporting or analytics that our different organizations do, a lot of organizations are in the reporting. I've set up an enterprise warehouse, I've set up a data lake, I'm doing my reporting. But as companies move further up the model or the maturity model, then you start looking at, how do I do forecasting? How do I predict? How do I actually can now do decision making or optimization using my data? And finally, how can I understand my data, get my machine learning models working to look at all the other considerations or the other possibilities? So as I move up the value chain, the different type of analytics, they play a different part in the organization itself. So that's where the challenge comes in terms of how you can actually implement the various types of analytics to support your business. So looking at the next slide, slide 19, this is where I highlighted the difference between a data science as a master data scientist versus as a team sport. So instead of having one master data scientist or multiple master data scientists, you need to be able to democratize this by having different people working with your team as a collaborative team sport, where data scientists involve people who are statisticians, as well as business users, as well as data engineers, all working together. Going to the next slide, slide 20, let me give an example of a consumer product sales company, right? So when you look at the different types of analytics, a lot of organizations, like I said, is typically focused on how many products have I, how many units of a particular SKU or product have I sold. If I'm a bank, who are my top customers in this branch, in this area? But when you start looking at the next wave of predictive, then you are looking at what products will I sell next week, next month, or Diwali is coming, or Festival of Holi is on us. What typically gets sold? How do I predict that? How do I predict how long it takes for my suppliers to deliver my goods to me, and which are the retail stores I should be supplying it to? So when you look at the different models that you have, then this typically comes out to play how you can actually use technologies like SPSS, machine learning, or decision optimization to work out where and how I should be sending, or what kind of goods I should be selling, and at what price I should be selling across the organization. So this can be automated by building machine learning models that actually learn based on your data, and as they move forward, the system gets smarter to be able to build its own logic and improve through self-tuning and self-learning. So moving on to slide 21, as I mentioned, if you look at it from an organization perspective, what IBM tries to do is we build a whole platform completely on open source. So as an organization, if you're trying to build technologies on Hadoop, or you try to put things on the cloud, but instead of trying to piece all of these components together, what IBM has done, whether it's on cloud or on-premise, we've made it easier for all organizations to be able to adopt Hadoop, or be able to adopt NoSQL technologies, or be able to adopt, for example, governance, GDPR, for example, or even AI, by making it very simple and modular that you can consume very easily. So that's the value proposition of how IBM is helping organizations drive more value from open source in this day and age. So with that, let me hand over back. Sir, I'm really sorry about the technology glitch that we've had, but please, either via phone call or through the chat group, raise your questions, and the moderator will help recite the questions to me.
Thank you very much, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, should you wish to ask any question, may type your question in the chat facility and send it to all panelists. Alternatively, you may press 0 then 1 on your telephone keypad to ask any audio questions. I repeat, ladies and gentlemen, should you wish to ask any web question, please type your questions in the chat facility. Alternatively, you may press 0 and 1 on your telephone keypad to ask any audio questions. At the meantime, till we receive your questions, we have already received a couple of questions offline, which I would hand it over to Ankit Parashar to take this ahead. Over to you, Ankit.
Yeah, hi Guna. I have a couple of questions with me. So my first question is, I would like to consolidate all my data into a data lake, and I am concerned about my overall process. What is your view?
So a lot of organizations try to implement, for example, a data lake. And because they've read everywhere that the data lake is the one repository where if you move all your data to Hadoop, you will be able to drive business value out of it. I've met a lot of organizations from banks to government where they've tried to go down a data lake strategy and try to move all of the data into Hadoop. The only person it actually ends up benefiting is a Hadoop vendor. But typically, the organization is really strong challenges in terms of how do I move my data, the cost of the data in Hadoop itself, which then starts growing, the skills to manage a Hadoop environment in terms of coding skills, etc. So all of these challenges typically hurt an organization who are starting to move in that direction. So yes, you should be looking at a data lake, but the data lake does not need to be a physical data lake, which is a master of all data in one place. You should be looking at implementing, for example, data federation or data virtualization, which allows you to actually have some data in Hadoop, or possibly not even in Hadoop. You just could be using Spark and, for example, HDFS as a repository, just using key components of Hadoop's technology, but leveraging the data in your other sources. So if you have data in SQL Server or Oracle or DB2, or you have documents in Word or PDF, and you have your data in various sources, you should be able to access all of them at the same time without having to move the data. So yes, one option is to move the data, but do not get too hung up about moving into a world where every data element needs to sit in one single place.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, and a lot of data is sitting in my document. So how can I leverage them to implement a true enterprise analytics engine?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. So while a lot of organizations start looking at, most organizations started off with the concept of, I wanted to do unstructured data analytics, but very few organizations actually get there. But without being able to extract value out of your unstructured data, if you're just trying to implement analytics using, for example, Hadoop, etc., it doesn't really make sense. Just like when we talked about the earlier case, being able to federate the data using a technology like BigSQL, right, where you actually have Hadoop data and you have other relational data sitting in your SQL Server or your DB2 or Oracle. Using BigSQL, you can actually federate that data or virtualize that data to support your analytics. Likewise, when you start looking at unstructured data, you should be able to drive value out of unstructured data by using technologies like Watson Explorer, where you can actually take text data, textual data, into a particular context and then move that data together with structured data. So for example, we did a project for an insurance company using both Hadoop and Watson Explorer, where we took all of their insurance policy documentation and combined it with their structured customer data to be able to deliver a better customer analytical CRM that looks at all of the different customers that they have, the various policies that they have, the various limits of claims that they have, to speed up the whole claim processing engine. So you can actually bring in unstructured data and structured data together into one platform to be able to analyze both of them and combine value from both of them.
Thank you very much. So we have a couple of questions here, and the first question reads, do you provide tools for extracting data and analysis?
Okay. So let me answer the question in different ways. So first question is, do I provide tools to extract data? Yes, we do. So IBM provides tools, and a lot of the tools are actually built on open source technologies as well. So for example, if I want to be able to extract data from textual documents, I could use Solar or any of the open source technologies. While at the same time, IBM also provides Button Explorer that is able to extract data from documents. So beyond just extracting text data, it can actually create a relationship between different set of words, what an orange color versus a orange fruit. So being able to differentiate that actually helps. But like I said, the ability to extract data is not the fundamental concern. It's from a technology perspective. Yes, we have the technology, but to be able to extract value out of your data in terms of having systems or applications that actually can analyze the data and provide you insights, right? The key thing comes down to the data being able to provide insights. So if IBM has the tools and technology, like I said, the prescriptive, the predictive, or even the AI, just technology that actually looks at your data and tells you things that could be happening or should be happening, or factors that are impeding your, for example, your growth that you were not aware of. So yes, the short answer is IBM does have the technology to be able to extract data as well as extract value and insights from your existing environment.
Thank you very much. But we have a follow-up question on that, which reads, how to consolidate that when we receive the data in different format, like in Excel and some data in Oracle?
Okay. So the key question here is, or the key consideration is that your data elements are coming from different places and probably even at different speeds. So you could be having, for example, if I expand on that question, you will be getting data in Excel from your subsidiaries maybe. You could be getting real-time data from IoT devices. So all of these data comes in multiple different formats, but to be able to translate that data and put it into a repository, and the repository could be a text file. Excel itself may end up being a repository if you're really a very small organization, but excuse me, you can actually take documents, Excel, Word, as well as structured data coming from accessing Oracle, SQL Server, etc., to be able to connect those elements of data to drive a value. So for example, I could be getting a submission from an Excel file, which is coming from a department or various systems that's actually interfacing with my primary system using Excel or a text file. While at the same time, my main customer database may be sitting on a CRM like Oracle or Salesforce.com, etc. But I can actually merge the elements to be able to provide a single view, either physically merging them in a single repository or virtually connecting to both of the data sources without having to consolidate them in one place.
Thank you very much. We have the next question, which reads, how can it be possible to pull all the data in one format?
Okay, so referring back to the earlier one, right? A lot of organizations try to move data, everything to a single repository. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, a lot of organizations said, I need to have a single enterprise warehouse. I use IBM DB2 or I use Oracle or SQL Server, and I will set up a single repository. And I'll bring in my data from my various transactional system, my core banking, my etc., into one system. But that day is gone. Do not try to move all your data into a single repository. That itself becomes a major IT challenge. It can be done, but you will spend a year of not getting value out of your data because you were too busy trying to consolidate all your data elements. So what a lot of organizations are doing is, depending on where the data is coming in, I would use maybe potentially multiple repositories. So if my data is coming in a very document format, so I could keep it as Excel, Or if my data is very much web data, I could use things like NoSQL databases. If my data is coming from like core transactional systems, like for example, my core banking or my retail system example, I could actually connect to all of them. And if I wanted to, I could create a master data repository, a master data lake, for example, where I put in all of my data sources in one repository, which takes data from Oracle, DB2, and Excel spreadsheet in a single repository. But like I said, you don't need to. You don't have to work on a project that's basically an IT consolidation project. You could keep data in various sources and be able to federate access to each one of the data. So for example, a big SQL technology allows you to access data in files, in Hadoop, in DB2, in Oracle, in Mongo, etc. Right? So a data virtualization technology like big SQL allows you to connect and access data from multiple sources.
Thank you very much. We have the next question, which reads, what are the common data problems and the basic corrections to be done at a minimum cost-effective solution to begin with? Also, can you indicate some open source tools to take care of one architecture? The diagram you showed has all IBM products, which is not necessarily open source.
Okay, so let me look at the second question. Yes, you could build everything that's on the platform, the one architecture with open source. Like I mentioned earlier, if you have a master carpenter and you are keen to use just pure open source, if you look at the chart itself, okay, could you move back to that slide, the open source slide, sorry, the one architecture slide, which is slide number . Would you be able to move back to slide 21, please? Thank you very much. So what are the open source technology that are there to able to achieve the IBM One architecture? So first one, from an infrastructure perspective, cloud is cloud. You could use IBM Cloud, you could use AWS, you could use Azure. That's a cloud infrastructure. Within the cloud infrastructure itself, or if you would like to build a private cloud infrastructure using Kubernetes and Docker, you could build a private cloud using OpenShift, using Cloud Foundry or IBM Cloud Private. But all of them are built on the same technologies, Kubernetes and Docker. And as you start implementing, for example, data repositories, you could use technologies like Postgres for relational databases. You could use Mongo for NoSQL database, Couchbase for document stores. You could use Hadoop for a unstructured and structured data analytics using technologies like, for example, Hive, etc. to do this. What IBM tries to do is that we use Hadoop as well. IBM has partnered with Hortonworks. So when we talk about Hadoop repository, and if you would like to do a Hadoop repository, then use Hortonworks Hadoop. IBM is helping you support Hortonworks Hadoop, and within Hortonworks Hadoop, we have Spark, etc., to help you do both your data movement, your data integration, etc. So, but if you would like to have IBM's value add, for example, if I'm trying to write tools to move data, I could use a completely GUI-driven interface like Big Integrate, which runs on top of Hadoop and Spark and Yarn, versus I hand-coding all of my data movement jobs. Likewise, if I want to use Postgres, you can support Postgres yourself, or like I said, IBM also provides support for an enterprise Postgres license. So if you would like to implement a completely open source environment, do it on Postgres yourself, you can, or IBM can support you by providing you support, annual support that gives you help to actually help you implement a Postgres repository. Likewise, when we talk about data science, IBM uses TensorFlow, Caffe, etc. We use RStudio to develop your R logic. But what we provide you is a platform that allows you to share all of the multiple models in our data science experience. So a lot of the building blocks are open source. You can stick to a pure open source environment, and I will share my contacts later. If you would like to see a pure open source version of this, I can share one with you as well. But what we believe in is that it takes a long time for an organization to build everything purely out of open source tools. It's like a master carpenter and nails. Can he build a house? Yes, he can build a house. But if I had the other tools, then what that helps me is I can build my house faster, I can rent out my house faster, and therefore I'll be able to collect rent and make money on my house quicker. So that's the value proposition of how to be able to drive insights while leveraging open source technology, etc. But IBM supports both the open source technology as well as value-add technologies that are built on top of open source.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, should you have any more questions, please type in a question in the chat facility. Well, at this time, we have no further questions from the audience. I would like to turn the program back to our speaker for today for any final or closing comments. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for spending the last 45 minutes, 50 minutes with me. I hope I was able to share with you that you can actually deliver more insights in your organization, respond faster using open source technologies, but at the same time, how you can get the help of someone like IBM to help you deliver machine learning, corporate governance, or data access on top of your open source innovations. We believe that both will go hand in hand, leveraging open source for innovation, while IBM leverages the open source technologies to drive more value add that makes it easier and faster for you to drive or deliver value back to your organization. So the last parting comment that I have is that you should seriously look at delivering insights within your organization using open source. Have a chat with IBM or drop me a note. We'll be more than happy to help you with a data workshop at no cost where we can help you identify which are the areas, which are the use cases that you can implement, and even show you how those technologies can be implemented just purely using open source or hybrid of IBM and open source technologies. All right, with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I would like to thank all the panel members and the participants who joined us today. But before we conclude the session, I would like to remind all the participants that we will have a feedback form which will just appear post the session gets over. I request you all to kindly take a minute and submit your feedback. Thank you very much once again. Wish you all a great day ahead. You may all disconnect your sessions now. Thank you very much.